Oh, hell yeah, Minecraft. What a great welcome. And here I am. I have a webcam again. And internet that's okay right now. It's just a little bit temperamental. I gotta wait for the right moment to stream. And gotta keep an eyeball on it. This will be a shortish stream since I don't have as much to say to do. And if the internet gets grumpy, then I'll end it so that I don't have it break all of a sudden instead. But yeah, let's take... Uh-oh. Cool. My scenes are all set up, and we can transition. And look at my design document. This game was called Arborshire, and it's now called Arcanaclysm. Hold on, I gotta turn the music down on my end. Very good. Now it's called Arcanaclysm. It is basically a different game, but it kind of started on the seeds of that old thing. Part of the benefit, I think, of taking a while to, plan ahead and do lots of design and brainstorming is I'm still in the pivotable zone. I don't have to make that first idea I had as much effort as I put into it. I think it's still doable, but it isn't what I want to make right now. So I shifted a bit. It's still going to have Zelda elements. It's still going to have tons of proc gen, but it's going to be a little bit more like a traditional roguelike, at least for now. The idea being that I can develop one gameplay loop and not a whole dungeon, and then add stuff over time. And if that becomes what I thought Arborshire would be, that would be sick. But if it just becomes a roguelike, that's better than not having a game. So that's what I'm doing. It's a kind of simpler roguelike. I'll talk more about that in a shorter video that is a dev update and not just a stream. But I wanted that context for today's stream because I just kind of felt like streaming. So yeah, let's get started. I'm going to summarize what I've done so far first, and then I'll talk about what I want to work on next. I'll close that. I think that's just a distraction. What this is since the Last Librarian and Daughter of Dreams both had like a damage handling system where like different damage types would do bonus damage or apply status effects. Obviously for an RPG like Daughter of Dreams, that's like really essential. Like that's a core game mechanic. I'm now making something with real-time combat, more like Zelda-style combat, and I like the damage type system, but I wanted to do another pass at it and not just drag and drop what I had in Daughter of Dreams for two reasons. First of all, it's a different genre. Like, I can adjust the types to fit the kind of gameplay that I'm looking for, and because it's not an RPG, I kind of want to simplify it. I like the complexity of damage types and armor types, kind of like RPGs have. But in an adventure game, I don't want there to be too much text on screen that you need to know in order to actually play the game and do things. I kind of just want it to be more like, it's a tool for me as a designer to give me space to work with. And what I mean by design space is just that like there's potential with the system at its foundation. I don't have to use all of it, but I want to be able to do something like add a new item that is particularly effective at killing some category of enemies, right? And so that's why I need damage handling and not just, it does 2 damage and that everything has some amount of health and you have to hit it some number of times. This gives a little bit more complexity to that, but hopefully not so much. Hopefully I can add depth without making it too complicated because it's not an RPG game. That complexity isn't desired. So what I have is I'm working on this idea of stacking critical hits. So any attack is going to have a base damage, and then when it hits things that it can do bonus damage to, it's just a crit. And if you crit multiple times, you get extra multipliers. So each crit is times 2, times 3, times 4, etc. I think Warframe does that same calculation. Although Warframe also has a crit damage multiplier, which I probably won't need. So it could be interesting. So the idea is like if you use a fire attack against an ice thing, you're going to do twice as much damage. And then all I need is the basic damage and then the damage types. And I don't have to list them separately like I did in Daughter of Dreams. Like in Daughter of Dreams, it would have said ice type or fire type damage plus 2 damage versus ice. But then another fire thing could do plus 5 damage versus ice. I don't think that level of granularity is necessary, and it's just extra numbers that the player has to add up in their head in order to know what the total damage output is going to be. So instead, it's just going to be 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. You just count the number of crits, and most of the time, there will only be 1 crit involved in any interaction. Yeah, I think it's going to be a rare situation where you can do 2 or 3 crits. But yeah, and then I expanded this to status effects. So I'll talk through these real quick. First of all, these are categorized physical, elemental, and magical, not for any gameplay reason. This categorization doesn't matter unless I want to do something like give a potion that increases elemental damage. That will only apply to these 4 damage types. I don't need to do that. This is just for me to conceptualize them as how they relate to the real world. So this is physical damage, which is borrowed from a little bit. Well, it's borrowed from Daughter of Dreams and D&D 5e. So there's slashing, piercing, and crushing damage, and then I added explosive damage because I like to be able to separate bombs from other kinds of items in a Zelda-like game. Kind of arbitrary. Then the idea is that these things can correspond, so the slashing would be like an axe or a boomerang, the piercing would be an arrow or a spear, crushing would be a hammer or I don't know, I can't think of anything else. A hammer for now. And I say axe and hammer because that will be the 2 main weapons that the player starts with in Arcanaclysm, because you can also use those to chop trees and break stone. So I'm kind of going for a roguelike where the entire terrain is destructible. And as I'm monologuing about this, I'll just point out for the record that I'm mostly streaming so that I can talk through it to a camera, which helps me think and figure out how to explain the design to myself more than anyone. But if anyone's watching, I of course appreciate it. So then the idea is that I can tag things based on types. And we'll get to types. They're a little bit more confusing than damage types, but armor types or like material types are things like stone or plant. And in general, like slashing damage, being weak to something would mean it doesn't do any damage at all. So you can't hit a stone wall with an axe and expect it to do anything. I could have done like it reduces the crit count, or it just reduces the damage by something, but I don't want to add that complexity. I just want this to be able to add immunities to things. So if you have an axe, you can't use it to chop stone. You need something that isn't slashing or piercing. Better yet, you need something that is crushing. Speaking of which, I wonder if that leads me to an edge case I need to account for, which is like if I had... I think I have a note that said somewhere, I think my note is gone. At any rate, I think that anything that doesn't have at least 1 physical tag probably can't break rocks most of the time. Like, I don't think that shooting a fireball at a rock should work, even if the type of that is technically arcane fire. So I'm going to leave a note here which puts... stone there. Or think about that later. But here's why I'm spending so much time on this damage table is I'm trying to think about every case of like what makes sense to have happen. And it may be the case that I can't actually just handle it with one table and I'll have to add manual exceptions. Like that spell can break rocks, that other one can't. It makes sense to me that a fireball could burn trees. So that would be a fire type. It's going to crit. Well, it's going to apply status effects. It's going to have burn, which does bonus things against plant-based stuff. We'll get to the status effects. So that makes sense. But what happens when a fireball, like a magical fireball, hits a rock? Like I could do it like that. But a fire hammer would still hit rock, it just wouldn't apply burn. Or maybe a fireball does break a rock. I don't know. Let me check something down here, which is this beneath the rotting pizza? I like this one. Final Fantasy VII. No you. Oh, no me. Hi, Ivinsky. Elastic armored. What was I checking? Oh, status effects. Burn should be... Oh, I already said burn can't affect rock. So I suppose that... what I actually do is I have crit armor for stone. So you have to crit in order to break stone. In which case, stone actually becomes a crit for... Well, stone is brittle. Let me list both of them here for now. Oh, it's also called rock now. Let me make that to rock. Are crits random? If so, is there a way to increase your chances to crits? No. In this case, the idea is that crits are guaranteed. If you hit with a matching type, I'm just calling that a crit. In Pokemon, it's just super effective or whatever. And so for every matching type that you have a crit on, it just adds a multiplier to your base damage. And the idea behind that is I don't like random crits because unless there's a way to increase the chance, because then you have this RNG element. Yeah, type matching. I'm just calling it crit. And I forgot the second thing, but I don't like RNG crits most of the time. But I do like mega damage scaling. So I prefer a type matching system because you can know, oh, if I hit that thing with this combination of stuff, it'll do tons of damage. And the idea is too that you can get different ways to like gain more crits against stuff. So like status effects that might give you extra crit stacks, or if you freeze a water-based thing, it'll just become ice, and then you can do an extra crit on that. Stuff like that, and I want to add more interesting interactions there. So then the idea is that most rock-type armor would have... I can add things that require crits, which will then exclude anything that doesn't crit against them. So a rock would require a crushing or an explosive attack to damage it, and it'd be immune to everything else. Yeah, like if crits... I like crits if you can increase your chances to get them, yeah. Or if they're more like a status effect. I agree, both of those things. I think the random RNG thing is only fun if you can do the RNG mitigation to make it work. Otherwise it's like, that's not quite always true. Like random crits with a low chance can be good if you don't rely on them, and then it's just kind of like, oh, hey, that was cool. Like, nice boon moment, like a kind of hype moment that could happen. But building like a combat system around them where the player depends on them becomes tricky, and I prefer to opt for not having them or making them really integral. So yeah, in this system, it's just a guaranteed 2 times or 3 times or 4 times damage, depending on how many crits you get. Now, my concern is here. I kind of want everything to be consistent and based just on damage types and armor types, but I'm thinking that's not possible because, like, rock behaves differently because it requires crits. I only want these 2 types to be able to damage rock. The idea being, if I wanted a fireball that could break walls, I would make it explosive. Or if I wanted, like, a magic spell that just threw a boulder at something that could break walls, then I would make that a crushing type spell. Like, it would need a physical component in order to break walls. That's my opinion. And so in that case, I can just make rock require those things, but I'm not sure, I'm not confident in conveying that to the player, because like now that means that rock is a different kind of armor than all the others. The others only affect what you crit versus or not, but the rock actually prevents you from doing damage if you don't crit, which is different than the rest. But maybe it doesn't matter, because I think the player can intuit that interaction. They'll be like, oh, okay. As long as you hit the rock with an attack that doesn't do it, that it shows a little like immune or a dink sound effect like Paper Mario or whatever, I think the player will quickly learn, oh, I can't use a fireball to break a rock. They don't necessarily need to be able to predict that behavior ahead of time. But I do want to make sure that I'm marking any of these properties that might have different behavior. For instance, I was thinking of having armored. Armored would kind of do the same thing where maybe not requiring crits, but piercing is the only type of damage I have right now that would crit versus armored. Everything else should do reduced damage as well, because it has armor, right? This is saying like something that has plate mail on would be an armored tag. And you would have to plan around that more. And I think that having these properties have exceptions is probably okay as long as they're well conveyed to the player. But it's not, it bothers me a little bit because I want it to be all nice and pretty, but. So then, okay, crushing. Do I need brittle if this is rock? Because I was thinking of brittle. Oh yeah, I do. Oh, wow. Didn't know you could do that with box. Huh. I missed that from Game Maker, where you could highlight text and drag it around. Brittle is for things like skeletons, which have like bones. They're brittle, and so if you hit them with a hammer or whatever, then they're gonna take bonus damage. Pando. Hey, Pando. Is this supposed to be an RPG? No, this is an adventure game with real-time combat, but it has some RPG design elements, yes. Mostly because that's what I'm familiar with. And I want to be able to have design space to add items that have different interactions with enemies and add lots of different things that you do. So it's a little bit more RPG-like than like Hades is, for instance. So yeah, brittle is a separate type for things made out of material that's vulnerable to being smashed, like bone or shell, but could still get hit by other stuff, unlike solid stone. So I guess I'll finish summarizing this. These are physical types for different kinds of weapons. And then elemental types, this gets into The separation of elemental and magical is a little bit arbitrary, but it's helpful to me because here's why. Elemental things could be both natural or physical in origin, like just lighting wood on fire is fire, which is still a different type than most things because it's fire, it's going to set stuff on fire, it's going to burn, and has these interactions with water and ice. But fire could also be summoned by magic. And so elemental types can all be natural or magical in their origin. So that's why I have this distinction. And again, physical, elemental, and magical won't matter to the player. Those are invisible to the player. These are just for me to categorize them. And then magical things can only be magical. And dark and light are elements that I've used in the past, which is why they're here. I think if I was to design elements from scratch, I would do it differently, but I'm trying to maintain a slightly consistent magic system between my games. And so dark and light are here, and they have interactions with undead categories, which are spectral and exanimate, which I've separated again, magical and physical undead. So spectral is like a ghost or a spirit or whatever, and then exanimate things are like risen from the dead zombies, skeletons, like they have a body basically, and spectral things don't. And then this crit versus cosmic, I won't get into that. But arcane is basically if it's magical, but it's not technically aligned with one of those other two things. So I would use that for like a magical fireball would probably be arcane fire, in a way where physical fire could just be fire or slashing fire or whatever. Anyways, it's not going to be perfect, but I just want to be thinking about all the possibilities going in so that I don't have to make so many changes later down the line, and I have a core foundation to design items with. So yeah, there's some examples here. And now I'm getting into the attributes, which I want to keep thinking about if they have any special properties. Let's see. Wait, no, I started a new table. Oh, status effects have tables. So the other thing I'm trying to do to make it more consistent is have at least some status effects be always tied to damage types. So something with a fire type damage will always have the burn status effect. There won't be anything that is fire type that can't also set stuff on fire. Just to be a little bit more consistent. Whereas in Daughter of Dreams, you could have a fire type thing, but it wouldn't, like, it would be boosted by bonus fire damage, but it wouldn't always burn things. I think that's a little bit silly. This is from Donkey Kong Country, or one of those Donkey Kong games. I forget. Oh, I guess I can check. Yeah. It doesn't actually... Yeah, it's from some Donkey Kong. Game Chops only shows the name of the song, so it's hard to tell sometimes. So... yeah, the only thing that's like kind of sorted out is this nice pretty table I made. And I'm still tweaking it. Everything else I'm going to start making tables for. Soulburn. Okay, so I'm gonna delete these because they're already in the table. Soulfire, that's complicated. I'll get into that later. So what I'm facing with this damage system is I spent a long time thinking about it, like 2 whole days probably, doing active design work on this document. I mean, which you can see there's like 6-7 pages of writing here. The goals was to make it more consistent and cover more edge cases. I think I've gotten that far. Those goals are accomplished. Now what I need to do is write down what I actually want to have happen, and I need to just be able to clearly mark exceptions, because I don't think everything is going to be listed. For instance, if I was to list everything, the other question is like, how much is shown to the player? Do I tell the player when they have a hammer that it's going to do a crit versus rock and brittle type things? I don't know if they need to know that. Can they intuit that? Right? Maybe I only need to remember these for myself and list status effects at least. And then the player would learn, like they do in most games, oh, this weapon is effective against that enemy. And they can make predictions based on not this table, they don't have this table, but they can make predictions based on what is intuitive to them as if it was real life. Like hitting a skeleton with a hammer. Is useful. A big hammer, I mean. I think a small hammer wouldn't really matter, but hitting a rock with a hammer works better than hitting it with a axe. Pokemon Diamond has a school that would explain type matches. Right. So the player would be told about that, and then you can assume through trial and error, the player would also pick up on this idea. Yes. I think that's probably the approach, is to not necessarily list it explicitly, but have that information available somewhere. And then the player by playing will figure it out. And if they really want to specifically know, yes, they can access this table, but I don't need it front and center on the UI because it's simple enough that like it shouldn't really become a game-breaking issue if they don't understand the type table. The other thing is like I'm only using it for a few small interactions. Most stuff just does their base damage. So like if I have if there's a case where like one enemy could only be hit by one specific weapon, that would be a problem. But it's more like the other way around where some specific weapons don't work against certain enemies. And as long as you, as the player, aren't going around with only one thing to attack with, you should be fine because something else you have will work, if it's not super effective, it will at least work. So right, I'm thinking like in the long run, there's like a bestiary where you can collect information on enemies you've defeated before, and it will tell you what armor types they have. And maybe in the inventory, if you look at your item, it will tell you what damage types it has and what it crits and is weak versus. But when you're just using it, it won't bother to tell you that. And if I can flavor the items well enough, it won't matter how it looks in the code. This can be boiled down to a shorthand for me in the code to convey the flavor of the item. But if I want to add exceptions, like I want this item to also crit versus some specific thing, I need to support that in the code so that I can do that without too much hassle. Okay, that's the exact same 2 sentences and half as many words. Okay, so now I'm just saying this table is the default behavior of anything. And if I end up making something that's a weird edge case, like summoning a boulder and throwing it at a wall, then and I can't figure out how to make it work with the table in a way that makes sense, then I can manually code what behaviors I wanted to have. And that's okay. This table is the default. As far as I can keep in my mind, everything I can think of that I want to add already fits. I can do it with this. And any exceptions are okay as long as I can justify them in the lore. Like, if I made an arcane dagger that was going to crit versus cosmic, it's not enough for me, like, it's already not enough for me to just make an item, give it the arcane type, and expect the players to be like, aha, that will crit versus cosmic enemies. That god I wanted to kill is cosmic type. I can now kill it with that dagger. If I was going to add a dagger like that, I was already going to describe in the flavor text that was forged by the ancient dwarves in order to kill gods. Like, that's going to be front and center in the design of the item. And then the arcane damage type is just there mechanically to allow it to do what the lore says it does. This is also how I did items in Daughter of Dreams, but the combat system was more complicated in that game, where one of the things I tried to do to like overcome the complexity of all of those damage calculations was just to make sure that the flavor text was explicit about what the item was for. Like the Earthbane dagger, which is why I keep using a dagger example, was like, the flavor text was like specifically crafted to destroy evil plants. And then it had a wind type that made it do bonus damage against plants. Oh, see, that the justification for that is because plants are earth type and wind was the counter to earth. But I've gone away with wind and earth because they don't make sense intuitively. Yo, Ian, how's it going? It's been a while. So I've done away with wind and earth, and I replaced them with electric and essence because they're more fun to work with. Electric is obvious. Essence for me is the term I've picked for like life energy. So this would cover poison and regeneration kinds of spells, as well as plant magic. So then in that case, the only thing that's strong against plants is fire, because you can burn them. But also in this game, plant and essence are their own separate types, whereas in Daughter of Dreams, I just had to make everything earth type, which worked okay, but this is more flexible. And then the other thing I did too is that these 4 elemental types are also armor types, which are the only ones that are also armor types, just so that I can do things like have a fireball be immune to fire. I just put the fire armor type on that fireball that I'm attacking. So I think I'm gonna just make this list of examples here just the let's do a few more examples, see if I can think of any items that I want to include. Since we were just talking about it, we'll cover Earthbane, which would be... What's a dagger? Is that piercing or slashing, or maybe both? I'll call it piercing, but it could be both. What would be the implications if I did both? Like, it's a dagger, you can use it for either task. Nothing. It wouldn't really change anything. In that case, I'll just simplify it to say piercing. Wait. Right, because slashing has no modifiers, the fact that piercing is there would not, like, if I added slashing, it wouldn't let you chop trees with the dagger because it has the piercing tag, which makes it weak to plants. Wait, what happened here? Somewhere I undid my... I don't know, I undid and then I lost the second half of that sentence. Whatever. So Earthbane is piercing. Interesting. So in Daughter of Dreams it was wind themed, and that's why it could kill plants. In this game I don't have access to that kind of concept. So it would have to be fire, or like flavor-wise, it would be essence type still, but specifically designed to poison plants. This system just doesn't support this, because I don't think I care. Earthbane would just have to be a fire dagger. Let me leave a note and I'll think about it later. That's like a shower thought. I have to sit here for 20 minutes not saying anything in order to figure that one out. Maybe I would just give it a new status effect. Like I would make a different kind of poison that works on plants. Could work. Well, testing it against examples. It doesn't have to support everything. There is just no wind type, so I guess what I would do is I would have to add an elemental wind and just do it that way, but I won't. I think when the coffee is done is when I will end the stream. And there's a couple more sips, but I'll take it slowly. I think if I can think of any other examples from my games or other games, there's Duran's daggers, which are just, well, we said a dagger is piercing. Hold on, I'm curious. Okay. D&D 5e agrees with me. That's what I'll go with. And Duran's daggers, technically, don't have any magical properties. They are boring daggers. He just uses them as a focus to cast magic. So he has, like, piercing fire damage, piercing arcane fire, that kind of stuff. Because a dagger is a blade? Sure. But that could be... Like, if you're going to stab with it, then it's piercing. But if you're going to cut with the edge, then it would be slashing. That's why earlier I was wondering if it should be both, but I'm going with piercing just to keep it simple. And also, I think if you're, like, fighting stuff, you're probably aiming to stab. Like, a surface cut is not effective. I'll just call this Duran's daggers to be clear. They're just piercing. When he casts magic, I don't even know if he uses the dagger. He has like the lifesteal stuff. How would I type lifesteal? I mean, maybe dark. I just give it dark. Roll an intelligence check. Oh, wait. I don't get advantage. 17. How's that, Ivinsky? Am I smart? I don't know what my intelligence modifier is. It's probably like -2. I don't know, I guess. It's just trying to replicate reality with only like 10 words total. So it's a necessary simplification. I'm gonna think of more examples of damage types to see if I'm confident with this. So Duran's daggers would be good against armored things. You rolled a 4. It was an opposed intelligence check. I win the argument. Duran's dagger would be... Well, this would suggest that you couldn't hurt a plant with a dagger. See, this made sense for arrows, but it makes way less sense for daggers. Just leave a note. I'll think about that one in the shower. Can you stab a plant? Good point. See, I think that's why I thought it didn't make sense for arrows. Like, you could sort of stab a plant, but I don't think it would be as effective as slashing it. So that's why a dagger would have to be both kinds, because you can't stab it, but you could totally use the dagger to, like, cut a flower, right? But I don't think you can necessarily do it to a tree. Maybe it's like, maybe you give slashing a crit versus plant, and then daggers are both. Yeah, this is why D&D has advantage, disadvantage. That makes sense, right? Because you're like, not sure about that one, then you give disadvantage. But it covers the edge cases where, like, okay, I can believe that could happen, it's just a little harder. Whereas what I have right now is this weak versus is just so binary that, like, being like, oh yeah, a dagger will never ever be able to do damage against a tree. Yes, exactly. If you use a dagger to cut a tree, you roll a disadvantage. So I think maybe what I'm seeing here is that I need the weak versus to be not negate all damage, but maybe negate one crit. Like it's an anti-crit, which is something I had thought about. So in that case, your dagger would just do half damage against the plant because it's piercing, and your arrows would do half damage. But then things that have crit armor would require a crit to do damage, and in that case, the weakness would negate that entirely. Like you wouldn't be able to hurt it at all. So you can't chop a rock with a dagger because the rock has crit armor. So I think then yes, do normal damage, or if it's direct opposite, do less damage. If it's the correct type, then do crit damage. And then on top of that simple version, I can also require crits to hit certain things in order to exclude stuff that isn't specifically crafted for that purpose. And the only thing I could think of for that is like destructible walls. Like for enemies, I mostly don't care. Like you'll just do less damage. That's totally fine. You can totally kill an enemy, like in Dark Souls, you can kill an enemy with just like a basic, with your fists if you want. It's more about saving time and making the fight less sketchy by having better attacks ready. My only concern is for like restricting what things you can literally actually break, and I have other ways to do that with the damage handling. So there's two things I want to do, which is requiring crits, and the other thing is like a damage minimum. So like you have to do at least X damage in order to damage this thing at all. In order to allow me to like upgrade weapons over time and have you be able to chop better stone or whatever. So a weak would just be an uncrit. If you've got nothing, it does base damage. If you have a crit, you do double damage. If you have a weakness, you do half damage, and those are all summed together. YouTube video title, can you beat Arcanaclysm as a pacifist? I'd love to see it. Could you? I should think about that as I design the game. Like just using environmental damage to defeat bosses and stuff. I love challenges like that. Okay. With this minimum damage thing, and the crit's not negating damage, I could almost do away with the crit armor, except if I want like a dagger to not be able to break a stone wall, the question is, do I want an end game dagger to be able to break an early game stone wall, right? Like, I guess in that case, sure, if you have the god-slaying dagger of the void, why not use it to mine iron? It'd be silly. This system might be at the point where I have to start testing it in game, and getting play testing and adjusting things. May deal crit. I'm just gonna call it a crit. Skyward Sword. Ballad of the Goddess. Ba-da-da-da-da-da. Think of a rock and brittle. Not all rocks are brittle. Most of them are not. But if there was like shale or something, then it could also be brittle and it'd be easier to break. Not that it matters, because anything that is strong against rock is even better against brittle things. Okay, so with this system, a dagger would do half damage against a tree or a bush. Compared to an axe or a sword, which makes sense. Same for a bow. You could chop down a tree by shooting arrows at it, I guess. It would just take forever. And if there's a minimum damage amount, then you would need really big arrows, like strong ones, or I could add a crit requirement, in which case a dagger and an arrow would not be able to chop that thing. But if it was an armored plant, then a dagger might be especially useful compared to an axe. Or I guess it would negate out, it would be the same as an axe. An armored plant being like, I don't know, a tree with like scale bark. You could like harvest to make armor. That'd be kind of cool, actually. Okay, I want to take up more examples and keep testing this. I'm also going to remove these lists because they're outdated, and I don't think I need them anymore. This one doesn't really work. The rest of them do. The Faded Axe and the Faded Hammer are going to be key items in Arcanaclysm, so I'll do them. I think by default, they're just slashing or crushing damage. Yeah. Let me double check something. Oh, hold on, I need to... I don't want to spoil too much right now, so I'm going to open a second copy of the design document. Key items. Or I need my Trello. Where's my items list? Well, I know it's in Trello. I don't remember where it is in... Oh, here it is. My planning document. There we go. Glint metal and Seraphite. Okay. So I think these two, are the same types still. They're just an upgrade. They just do more damage. They're a most traditional type of upgrade. Now a Seraphite, I was thinking would be, I guess, probably light. And it would do bonus damage against exanimate undead. Like Seraph being like angelic. So this would be slashing light, and this would be crushing light. So then these could do the same damage as glint metal, or maybe a little bit more. But also they're gonna now crit versus exanimate undead. So it's an upgrade, but it's a side upgrade. It's not just better against everything, it's just better against a specific type of category of enemy. Which does mean if I add this into the first version of the game, I probably want some Exanimate Undead added to the game also. Some of them do... Oh. Maybe crit armor could be a little bit more granular too, where it's just the number of crits required, and that could be 0, which would mean if you were weak to that thing, it wouldn't do anything either. So thinking about that, crit armor equals 1. So with this system, what I'm thinking is that you sum the number of crits, which would include weaknesses. Any number larger, so with 0 crits, you do base damage. With more than that, you do that number of times base damage. With less than that, you do that number divided by base damage. So like, 3 weaknesses in this table would be 1/8 damage. But then a crit armor of 0 means you'll do base damage unless you have 1 or more weaknesses. So that way a slime would, because it's elastic, would be completely immune to crushing and explosive damage. But anything else, it would still do damage. Whereas a rock would have a crit armor of 1, requiring you to use crushing or explosive damage to break it. That's implementation details, but I'll leave that note for there. I wonder if piercing could do extra damage versus elastic. It's probably not necessary. Is this the merry-go-round thing? What is this? Christmas music? It's not what I want. It's okay. I'll recover. This is why I hate Christmas music. Now it's gonna be stuck in my head all day. I don't even like it. Ugh. Okay, so Duran's Vengeance. Hold on, adding a note to my notes. Note to my notes. Yeah, actually. Need an X-animate enemy if Seraphite does crit with this X-animate. I don't want to add Seraphite and have it have no purpose at all. So if I decide to go with this plan, that it has light type, then I need an X-animate enemy in the game in order to have that be justified. I do have a thought of something that could be X-animate though, which I think is down here. Where is it? Enemies? Shadehawk? Spectral Cosmic? Could be. So Duran's Vengeance is like red lightning that's caused by damage he took. So it's probably Arcane Electric. Or like Arcane Electric Fire. Sure, why not? Something could be Arcane Electric. It could be Electric and Fire. So that would do shock and burn, which is kind of interesting. I wonder what type I did it in Daughter of Dreams. Let's go find out. Because all of these were here. And I don't think I had any types. I guess it's probably, maybe it's like Electric Dark. Bonus damage versus Spectral. That kind of makes sense. Let me go check what it was in Daughter of Dreams. Slow. Did this, there we go. Okay, so it was Arcane Fire. Yeah, it just had a lightning theme, but it was Arcane Fire. Makes sense to me. We also had spells. Sonya had spells. Okay, so Talrea's Wrath. Is that like a light beam thing? So that'd be like Arcane Light or maybe just Magical Light? Magical Light. Since Magical isn't a type in Arcanaclysm, it would be Arcane Light, I think. Sonya's Talrea's Wrath. That's not confusing at all. In Arcanaclysm, I'm using Arcane to represent magical damage if it doesn't have a physical source. Although, I guess Arcane, maybe it's just light then. It's kind of interesting how this is just giving me like a different realm of where I can do flavor. Zora's Domain. Physical Ice. Channel Frost was Magical Ice. Arcane Terminus. What a cool spell name. Oh, damage equal to current MP. And I think it spends all your MP too. It's bonkers. And I just made it pure arcane. Giga Globber. The Giga Globber had a few good ones. Energizing Aurora. No, that's not. Here's Shock Aura. Magical Electrical. So that would be Arcane Electric or just Electric. Pure Electric. I think that's okay. Pure Fire, Pure Ice, Pure Light. I don't need Arcane unless it is designed to kill gods, I think. Which is also part of why, like in D&D, it's a little bit more about like each source. So it's like you have a 1d10 physical plus 1d4 fire or something for Burning Blade or whatever. And then if something's immune to fire, it'll still take the physical damage. Whereas in this system, they're all combined together. And the fact that combined all together kind of makes this idea better too, because then like a Burning Blade will still do some damage to something that is vulnerable to fire, as opposed to none, unless it's like purely elemental, right? And then I can give it a higher crit armor. Magical Fire. They had just impact damage, right? Yeah, they had Clobber. And then these guys had Physical Poison, which in Toxic Lash would be Slashing Essence in Arcanaclysm. I'll write that down. Husks, Toxic Lash, DOD. I'm gonna write those down, both of them. Becomes Slashing Essence. Suffer Blight, probably the same thing. Critical Poison. Oh, this is just status effects. It doesn't have a damage type in this game. Spear Strike, physical. Summon Reinforcements, does nothing, of course. He's a Slayer. What did it have? Death Strike. Physical Dark, interesting. What does this do? Oh, what a cool ability that's completely useless. This is on an enemy, and they almost never kill the player. But this is a spell where if you kill something, you regain full HP. I should have given this to the player as a charm. That would be way more useful for the player than... Like, put that on Duran, he'd become truly invincible. But I do like this idea. Like, based on kills, when you kill, gain HP. That's something I could totally add on as an additional ability for stuff. Physical Dark would be flashing dark. And then I'm going to leave a note. That would be interesting. So maybe even if I don't add the X enemy in the first version of Arcanaclysm, I could have something like regain health on hit. So let me just leave it more powerful, more specific note here. On hit, on kill, on taking damage, effects, etc. So then I could just add enchantments like that, like heal on hit, and stick those onto any items that I want to use them on. Not right away though. That's not a first version thing, unless it is. We'll see. Thanks for the hearts, whoever's sending all those. And speaking of that, I think I'm gonna head out. I need to like put all this into tables and stuff, but thanks everyone for being my sounding board as I work through the different implications of this. And I'll polish this up, and Arcanaclysm will be playable sooner than later. So if you're not already, which you probably are, join the Discord, and like next couple of months, there will be a playable version of this game. Very simple, short version of this game, but it'll be ready. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And then I will be continuing to develop Arcanaclysm for a long time after that. Or, you know, at least a little while. Oof, just joined. Welcome, Ethan, just in time for me to say goodbye. Oh wait, hold on. I can go to my other view and say bye, everybody. Thanks for stopping by, and stay tuned for more Arcanaclysm news in the future.